Welcome to another edition of the Nines presented by AT&T. We're here in the beautiful Cloud9 studio. That's right, it's up and running finally, but no players are yet allowed to join me here, so it's just me alone talking to webcams. But that's fine because it's still better than it was before. We're going to be here today talking about Valorant. Now, Valorant's an up-and-coming esport with some third-party tournaments have started with the help of Riot's promotions. So this last week, we did see the T1 Ignition series in partnership with Nerd Street Gamers get some pretty good viewership, hitting up there in the 50,000 concurrent mark. So it's a really good start to North American Valorant esports overall. And today we'll be talking to the two announced players from Cloud9. It will be TenZ and the more recently announced Relics. So I'd like to welcome them to the show so we can have a conversation with them about the state of Valorant overall, what their goals are as part of the Cloud9 roster, and where they think the competitive scene is going. So welcome, TenZ, Relics.
Hi, Monte. Good to be here.
Yeah, nice to see you guys again. So I've been secretly watching some of your scrims, by the way, but you wouldn't know that. Anyway, so Relics, you're the most recently announced player on the Cloud9 roster, and you guys have been trying out a bunch of different iterations of players throughout some of these early tournaments. So, TenZ, why did you want Relics on this team?
I played with Skylar before, and he was a really good teammate, I'd say. And when I played against him in Valorant recently, he was just owning me, so I was like, damn, he's good. Gotta have him.
And why this team, Relics, out of the ones I'm sure you've been playing around on various other rosters or trying to figure out where you belong in the overall Valorant esports scene?
Yeah, so I actually wasn't doing as much of that as you'd think. I was kind of playing the game and just seeing like what I thought about it, and then I got asked by TenZ and the squad if I was interested in scrimming with them, and one thing led to another, and I just kind of felt like a good fit in their existing, what they had going on. So here I am.
And as you guys look for more teammates, what would you say your priorities are as part of Cloud9 when you build out the rest of this team?
I'd say that we just want everything to mesh well, like role-wise, personality-wise, and just have everything fluid.
I think another big thing is, like, with it being a new esport, is you want everyone to have the same like vision or goal, with improving and understanding that like people will have to make sacrifices for the team to be better, maybe play agents they don't really like or spots they don't really like, but it's for like the team to be the best we can be.
Relics, one thing I've noticed from watching your stream in a lot of these tournaments is you're extremely vocal on this roster. What would you say that your role within the team is?
Right now, I'm kind of like the second voice in the team. We've been playing with Shinobi, and he's the IGL, so he makes all the calls and things like that. But I sort of provide like second information or suggestions for things to do mid-round to sort of like lighten the load on him. And
what agents are you typically playing right now in terms of your position?
Yeah, nowadays I play like Phoenix, Omen. I was playing a lot of Brimstone, which is why I think I was really vocal, because I helped set up executes with the smokes and whatnot. But now playing agents like Omen and Phoenix, I'm kind of a little more free to do what I want, but I can still help make mid-round calls like based on what I'm seeing on the map and whatnot.
And for those who don't know you, TenZ, who haven't seen you playing in a tournament right now, you have really been playing a lot of the Jet, and as we've discussed before, you've been taking a lot of opportunities to play the operator and use Jet's mobility in order to set up picks with that agent, right?
Yeah. So, like, I'd say I'm pretty comfortable on Jet, and we tried putting me on different characters, but I'd say by far felt the best personally for me. And maybe for the team, me playing Jet, just because I'm able to do a lot more plays, like solo plays, and communicate better.
Are there any other agents that you like to use in the professional scene, or are you just really sticking to that Jet right now?
At the moment, it's basically just Jet, but I have been playing a little bit of Raze.
One thing I've noticed is that Ever since you guys as a team started using Jet, we've seen it creep into professional play more and more across a variety of teams, and sort of a more even mix of agents develop in the professional scene. Would you say that you were responsible for a lot of the Jet usage? Were you showing people how that was done?
Not really. I don't think.
Because one thing people might not know is that you've actually had some of the highest player ratings at the tournaments that you've played in, even though Cloud9 hasn't always, or Cloud9 and Friends, I should say. There is no official five-player roster yet. You've had one of the highest ratings, even though you haven't made a lot of these playoffs. So your individual performance has been exceptional.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So let's talk about the state of Valorant right now before we kind of get into this last weekend's event with the T1 Invitational event. So as the game comes out, they release a new map, Ascent. So how are you guys feeling about the map pool right now? There are only 4 maps, which does make hosting these esports events a little bit challenging if we're talking about going into a map veto process like you're kind of used to in CSGO. So how are you feeling about the overall map pool right now, and what are you hoping to see in terms of additional maps in the future?
So Tyson's waiting for me to answer this one.
Yeah.
I think like the map pool right now as it is decent. Of course, you want more maps because there's more variety, and then I think the same way that League works, eventually in this game, when they also continue to add more agents, we might even see like a pick ban phase for agents along with map vetoing. But right now, you kind of just need to be capable of playing all 4 maps because it's not that many. I'd like to see them. They kind of have this thing going on where they said they're going to have one like gimmick per map. Split has the ropes, Bind has the teleporter, Haven has 3 sites, and Ascent has like the closing doors. And that's cool and everything, but I kind of want them to focus on maybe having maps with some wider open space and less about like the gimmicky things, because a lot of the maps, it's just narrow kind of corridors you funnel into when you're going onto the sites, and it keeps things kind of static, I guess, in terms of how you can take things. I mean,
I'd agree with Skylar. Like, once there is like the good amount of maps, then we could properly like ban and pick maps, and then we can get more in depth on the maps that we're good at. And like one team, like teams in CS are always instant ban one map because they don't want to play that map, or it'd be nice to kind of have that type of system. But at the moment, you basically have to know how to play every map.
One thing that you touched on is the narrowness or the small field of the maps. And part of that, I know that the devs have said that it's a factor of the abilities within the game that have made, like, kind of caused the maps to be designed that way, because having all of these abilities adds kind of an extra layer of difficulty when it comes to map design. Do you think it's possible to open up these maps, or would that give certain agents too much of an advantage?
I think it's possible, but I do think because of like the nature of the game that they do need to. There's a lot of things to take into consideration when you're making a map with all the different agents and their abilities and making sure that things are balanced. I think like the widest open area of a map I can think of is like the middle area on Ascent, where you can like go to either site. I think it's just a matter of making sure that agents can still use their abilities, and it's not so wide that this abilities are useless, and it's not so it's not made in such a way that certain agents will have like a game breaking advantage on parts of maps just because of like the design of their abilities and how the map is. Not game breaking, but an advantage nonetheless.
We saw the new map. Do you have any initial impressions of Ascent compared to the rest of the map pool? How much do you like it compared to the other maps? Are there any things that you think need to be changed about it heading in?
Personally, right now, I feel like Ascent's pretty dominated, and it's because of the wide nature of the map, and with the attacking side not really having much utility to deal with the operators other than smoking off the angles and then like going into the smokes and pushing up through that. But most of the time, like if you run out of the smokes or you waste too much time, and only like certain characters can flash, and they can only flash in a specific way, such as like Phoenix can only flash around corners. So it's really easy for an operator to kind of deal with that. And that's just what I've been feeling lately.
Yeah, a lot of people have been talking about dealing with operators in Valorant compared to the op in CS, because in CS, if everyone on your team buys a flash and everyone buys a smoke, you have 10 flashes, 5 smokes, 5 molotovs. You have a lot of utility to cut off angles from ops and make it so you don't just die for free. But in Valorant, if you have an agent with flashes, maybe you have 2 flashes, maybe you have 3 smokes. You have a lot less to work with to really navigate the map safely versus ops. So you kind of have to take things differently. Maybe instead of spreading the map, you just have to all group on one side to execute with all of your abilities, because it's hard to get control. I think Ascent, I agree that because a lot of like the, I guess like the angles you can hold, they're just really long like straightaways that you can post on with an op. Um, I kind of like Ascent though. I don't think it's bad necessarily. I think maybe the middle area where we're talking about can maybe be like cleaned up a little bit. It's kind of when you're attacking, there's just a lot of different angles you have to look at from catwalk, and then like also in the middle, and like they can even see you in mid from their spawn if they sit on top of like a fountain or like a sage wall. So there's like a lot of really weird spots to look at when you're like walking through middle. And I think if they kind of made it a little neater, it would be easier for attack maybe.
How would you rate the maps in terms of your preference right now? Not necessarily what you would want to play every time at the professional level, but in terms of what you enjoy playing the most.
I'd say I enjoy right now, even like probably Haven. I feel like Haven is pretty clean and it's pretty like it's a straightforward map. I'd say it's probably like the Mirage or like the Cache of Valorant, just really straightforward.
Yeah, I'm probably like Haven and Bind are probably 2 that I like playing a lot. Um, Sort of for like the same reasoning. At first, I wasn't really sure how I would feel about a map like Haven having 3 sites, because there's nothing really nothing like that in CS, and but it kind of creates a unique dynamic where in a 5v5 competitive tack shooter, you now have to spread your defense even thinner to cover the 3 sites. But it's the same with offense. If you're going to default the map and spread for control, you have to divide your numbers across all the different areas. So it's kind of different. I like Haven.
I was really worried about Haven as well, but I think it's actually my favorite map of them all. So I was really surprised that the 3-site one was the one that I was going to be enjoying the most. Let's switch to talk about ranked right now, because there's been a lot of conversation in Valorant, now that the ranked mode is out, about should there be a specific solo duo queue? Should you be allowed to 5-stack all in the same ranked ladder? What has been your experience in these early days of ranked with that system?
So my personal experience with the solo queue system, it's been a little bit better lately, but when I was first playing, I think most like out of my 10 games, I played against 7 5-stacks when I was solo queue, and so it wasn't really nice, but it's all right.
I think there's a couple things that are like issues in ranked. I think like one of the biggest issues is the fact that like what Tyson talked about, that you can solo queue and just go against 5-stacks. In fact, I had the same experience where I even asked all of my teammates to confirm they were all solo queues, and we were 5 solo queues versus a 5-stack, or 5 solo queues versus a 4-stack with 1 solo. And that doesn't really make for very competitive games usually, and it's also just not as enjoyable. A lot of people wanted them just to copy and paste the system from League, where there's a solo, duo, and a flex queue.
Sure.
I don't know. I think they're trying to think of a different way to approach the situation. I also think the fact that there's no sort of leaderboard or ranking for the highest rank is kind of not great, because once you reach Radiant, so like once you rank up, there's really no incentive to play. The only thing that can happen is you're going to lose your rank, that you'll down rank back to Immortal. There's no leaderboard that can challenge. So it's kind of like you hit Radiant and it's like, all right, I beat the game.
Yeah.
I have to imagine that Riot's working on that, because just the way they operate as a company is about those rankings and competitive structures. So I would assume that that's something that is going to be in the works as an overall leaderboard, especially at the highest ranks. They're probably just figuring out how to do it right now, especially since they just implemented the system. And I would think that they probably want to work out some of the bugs in how it works before they start saying this is the number one player. Because the ripple effect of that's probably going to be huge if you're thinking about it, right? Because if they say, okay, this is the number one player on the ladder, as an up-and-coming esport, there are going to be a bunch of teams that are going to be trying to sign that person, or it's going to be a big deal that that person is there. So I would imagine they want to make sure that person is super legit before they make any of those kind of decisions, right?
Yeah, so they might be working on fundamentally how ranked works, how fast you gain points and rank up and rank down and all of that type of stuff before they think about implementing a leader.
I also think that they don't necessarily want to I think they're probably testing to see about the solo versus the stacking in queues, because they might not want somebody who only 5 stacks or to be, at the top of the ladder, or a player that only solo queues. Like, who is the highest player that only solo queues? And if that person is in the 200th on the ladder, that might be something that they want to work out as well. So I imagine they're probably looking at that internally and seeing exactly how they want to display that information before they put it out there. That would be my assumption. Is there anything that you guys would like to see in the ladder? Would you prefer having that solo queue experience or the split ladder? Is it a huge deal to have the 5 stacks in there?
I feel like I would like just like a straight solo queue or like a flex queue, similar to League.
It's just nice because not only is it the fact that if there's a solo queue ladder, then you don't have to worry about always getting a group of people to play together. I think a lot of people now, because of the way ranked is, they don't want to play ranked unless they can play with 3 or 4 friends. Just because they know if they solo, or even if they play with one other friend, they can run into a 5 stack and it'll be uneven, opposition. I do think they should implement something. I would like at least a solo queue, if not like also a flex queue, and something like that.
What other features are you hoping gets added to the game beyond new maps, beyond this ranking system where you can actually see people in a numerical order in Radiant? What do you think would really expand the game? Because they made some big announcements recently about the acts and the episodes, so we know we're going to be getting, 3 new agents every act, I think is the language they use. So 1 per episode, which is every 2 months. So we're getting 6 new agents a year, which I think is a pretty good release schedule for adding new content into the game. What are your thoughts on other additions that they could make in order to make the game more attractive to you guys?
This is like a really common request, but I think that they should add a deathmatch mode or some sort of mode where you can. A lot of people like just ability free, just go run around with the different guns in the game and be able to shoot at other players and not just bots. Because especially with a game like Valorant, where there's a ton of people coming in from other games, even non-FPS titles, League players or, TFT players, I don't know. But just in general, a deathmatch mode would help people that aren't very familiar with FPS games get used to the mechanics. And then plus, even for people that are high level players, it's a nice way to warm up and, get ready to play and just stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree with Skylar. I mess up like a lot of situations because I try like spraying, for example, and I'm not really used to spraying on full moving players that are like counter strafing and stuff. So it's a little bit rough, and I'm just the only practice I can get is in the practice range or just playing the game itself.
Yeah, I personally have had that issue as well, and really wish that there was a death match so that I could practice, because I have horrible mechanics, and just playing the game and doing the practice range aren't cutting it for me, because I've never really competed in a PC FPS, I will say, because I come from an RTS and MOBA background, and then I just played tanks in Overwatch to avoid having to aim, so I'm really screwed in this game. I'm really screwed. So coming into this week's actual esports event, exciting time. So for those of you who don't know, what's going on right now is that Riot is running the Ignition series of tournaments in all various regions around the world. And this one was the first one in North America, was hosted by T1 and Nerd Street Gamers. Now, what happens is this time period is blocked off as an exclusive window for that Ignition series partner, which was T1 in this case, and they're able to run an event. So this was really the first showcasing of the game with, I would say, up-and-coming professional teams after the official launch of Valorant as a title, and featured a $50,000 prize pool, so pretty significant. professional production, etc. And you guys were one of the teams that were invited to it. Now, one thing that was pretty unique about this tournament was that they started a different kind of map veto system because now there were 4 maps in the pool. So can you describe how that worked for you guys and what you thought about it?
Skylar, you have this one?
Yeah, if I recall correctly, the veto system that they implemented in the tournament was because there was best of 3s for all of the matches. Yes. There's only 4 maps, so I'm pretty sure they let the higher seed just ban a map.
Yes.
And then basically the rest were played, obviously.
But the lower seed picked the map then. As
they
a
got
result.
they got the
pick the first map.
Yeah. I think it's probably the best that you can do with like what you're working with only 4 maps. We played a lot of other tournaments where their veto systems were really weird. Since there's only 3 maps, like some of the BO1s, they were just like, oh yeah, there's no split in this tournament. People didn't want to play split. And I'm like, there's only 3 maps. How are you removing a third? And it's just like, also you can't play Raze. It's like, okay. But I think it's sort of like, in its fledgling state of an esport, and as it continues to grow and tournament organizers continue to host events, they'll find better ways to do seeding of teams and better ways to do, picks and vetoes and stuff. But with only 4 maps, there's only so much you can do.
TenZ, what did you think of this system? Was this acceptable to you, or would you like to see something different done?
I wasn't really paying attention to the pick ban type thing for the last tournament. I was just like, let's play. Let's play some games.
Whose job is that on the team right now? Is it your job, Skylar?
Partially. It's probably a shared responsibility.
So this tournament, you guys are the officially announced players. You guys are the ones who are locked into the roster. And as you alluded to, you have been playing a lot with Shinobi as well as Mitch. And then you've been playing some with Infinite, but now you're playing with Poach instead. So explain to me why these 3 other players and what role each of them performs on the team.
So right now we're playing with Shinobi, and Shinobi's acting as our IGL, and he's making most of the calls and just like mid rounds most of the time. And second up, Mitch. I'd say Mitch is probably in the flex position where he's just kind of like, we're trying out different stuff. And then for the tournament, we were using Poach. We're just trying out a bunch of players and seeing what meshes well, and what comps are good for us.
What comps have you been particularly liking these days, and what about them makes it unique to Cloud9?
So I think we've been running no Sage. I think that's our kind of go-to. But we got 0-2'd in the tournament. That's the 2 BO3s that we didn't use Sage, and then the one time we ran Sage, then we 2-1'd phase. So might be good to run a Sage.
TSM hasn't been running a Sage either, right?
I think on some maps, the other thing about Valorant is that agent picks can be map dependent.
Sure.
We were discussing it. There's certain maps where we still think Sage is pretty strong, whereas maybe she's not as necessary on other maps, so you can substitute her for someone else.
Which maps do you think you could get away with not having the Sage on? Because that's a pretty bold choice, because many professional players consider her to be absolutely essential right now because of the way that she stalls out and can kind of handle points by herself.
Yeah, I don't think that there's another agent that's as good as stalling and delaying hits as she is, even though they literally nerfed her entire kit. They nerfed her slow, her wall, and her heal. Even still, she's one of the strongest defenders. I think, personally, I don't think that she's as useful on Ascent, just because of the map is still very narrow with your entrances into sites, but there's a lot more options you can do to split stuff. If you take the middle part of the map and you take market, you can split B through the doors, or you can go through the defender spawn and split a site. Even splitting the other site through catwalk, you can come in through A main, or you can go in through grass where the garage door is. You can go break the glass and flank from heaven. So it's a lot more multi-dimensional. So it's not like she can just wall the one entrance to the site or slow the one area, and then it's like you're going up short A on Vine, you get Sage walled. Okay, guys, let's turn around. Or like
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to circumvent her abilities, I think. But she's still really strong, and I think you'll still see her as a relatively like common meta pick on most teams.
Yeah, I agree with Skylar. With Sage's worst map is probably Ascent, just because it's a lot better just to get an extra character that has that utility, or like the flashbang, for example. Especially how I said before that Ascent is very op dominated, so it definitely helps to like get that flash, get that smoke to clear at the angles and stop the oppers from being posted.
So you come into this tournament, this first big event after the game's launch. You guys have competed with various teammates ever since beta. But you guys are placed in a group of 4 teams, and those teams are FaZe, Cloud9, so you guys were the invited one, as well as 2 qualifier teams, which is what? Together we are terrific.
Terrific.
Yes, which is a very bad acronym. But I love that about up-and-coming esports. I miss some of those from the Overwatch days as well. And a team called Prospects. Now, what was so weird about your results is you guys, the top 2 teams go to the playoffs. You guys got knocked out in the group stage, but you got knocked out by the qualifier teams while beating FaZe, a team that had a very deep run in this event. So walk me through what happened on this group stage day for you guys.
So one thing I will start off by saying is a lot of the time, looking at these tournaments, people give a lot of credit and I guess credibility to the big name orgs, Cloud9, FaZe, TSM.
As they should. Okay.
Of course, in the sense that, especially with a team like ours, where we were basically rotating fifths out.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, we ended up saying like, let's use Poach for this event, and we scrimmed with him, I don't know, 3 days or something before the event. But I do want to give credit to like these up and coming rosters, like not necessarily up and coming rosters, but these qualified teams you're talking about, like Together We Are Terrific and Prospect. They're filled with recognizable names from CS, people like FNS, people like Vice, and so they certainly have the ability as far as that may go. Now, I think at least for us, I'll let Tyson speak in a second, but we kind of started out slow, and it felt a lot different than our week of scrims. We were calming a lot less. Things weren't really flowing as they would in scrims. We were sort of disconnected. I don't know if you have anything to add, Tyson.
Yeah, I'd say we probably, for the first 2 maps, at least, we weren't playing like ourselves. We were kind of getting a little bit tilted, and then the comms were at a low, so it was a little bit rough.
Sorry, I was going to say the other thing about trying out different fifths is that the different people that we're playing with are playing different agents, and so depending on who they're playing, it changes our comp. So Shinobi or Mitch or me would just be playing a new agent on a map because they are the person we're trying out as a Cypher main, or they want to play Brimstone, so I'm not playing Brimstone, or whatever it might be.
Makes a lot of sense, and it's so early in the game too that it's not a disaster, right? You want to find the best players that are going to fit you, and there's plenty of time to get this roster together, especially under the Cloud9 banner, who's going to be operating this team as the esport develops. And especially these early days too, when we only have the 4 maps and the content is not really fully fleshed out. Like, it's still not in the state that it's going to be in terms of a year of play from now. Now, that could be said of a game like League of Legends, but I feel like it's going to take several more maps and a few more agents to really feel like a more comprehensive professional experience.
I would agree with you.
So you guys had a bit of a tough run in this tournament, but I also want to talk about some of the other teams that have been emerging and your impressions of them, because I imagine that you're scrimming against them day in and day out right now, and the team that has really been impressing is TSM, with some of the old Orgless players from CSGO, players like Wardell and Sub Rosa, that have had really extraordinary individual ability and decided to make the swap over. What have been your impressions of TSM as a Valorant team, and what do you think are their primary strengths right now?
I think one of their primary strengths is that have players individually that like multiple different people can pop off, for instance. So let's say Wardell's not having a good game, it could be Sabrosa, or if it's not him, it could be Drone. And then they're backed by Cutler and Hayes, who are former like old school CS teammates for a long time on CLG. And so they have, and Hayes is also their in-game leader. So they kind of have a mix of experience and lots of a long tenure in esports playing competitively, and then some newer players who played at high levels in CS competitively. So they definitely have what it takes to make it, and have transitioned to this game to see what they can do. I think TSM and T1 are probably like the two current teams emerging in the competitive Valorant scene as like the top dogs at the moment.
Yeah. I'd say the same with Skylar. I think TSM and T1 are probably the best teams in Valorant right now. And like the thing with TSM, like Skylar said before, each person can pop off. Drone, Sabrosa, Wardell, and like they play around the person that's having like the good game.
Who do you think are some of the dark horses? Because there was a lot of conversation about T1 versus TSM. Those were the teams that were in the finals this last week. But for those fans who are looking for a more up-and-coming roster, who do you think is underrated at the moment?
I'm trying to think.
I'm trying to think of people that we've been playing against. I mean, in terms of like the rosters that are unsigned, they kind of change a lot because it's just 5 people playing together, and at any moment, like one of them might have a more enticing offer. I think of the signed teams, I don't know if it's necessarily up and coming, but I like watching Immortals. They're kind of hit or miss. If their players are on, they're exciting to watch, but sometimes they're a little I guess like static, but their play style, they have a couple CS players again, and I know Asuna from CS is a very like hyper aggressive player. He plays kind of like TenZ, and it's just fun to watch players like that. They may not succeed a lot of the time, but when they're hitting their shots and they're playing aggro and getting in their opponent's face, it's fun to watch.
I'd probably say this Prospects team, honestly.
What do you like about them?
They're insane.
So because, as you say, there's a lot of player movement going around right now, out of the unsigned players, do you guys have any players that you thought performed particularly well in this event that surprised you a bit?
I wouldn't say it surprised me necessarily, but we played Prospects in the event, and they were playing with Vice, who we had scrimmed with a couple weeks prior, and he, I think, is like just now actually like taking Valorant like seriously. I think he played during the beta and whatnot, but he didn't have a lot of time in. And we were playing with him. He definitely seemed like he was still trying to like absorb all of the information and like all the stuff going on and sort of getting used to the pace of the game. But then in the tournament, he was owning. Vice was popping off. So yeah, I think that he could definitely be a strong player. I don't know if anyone else stands out to you, Tyson.
Yeah, like I said before, that Dice guy, I feel like he's a pretty good up-and-coming player that people should probably look out for.
Oh, I thought of one more on Together We Are Terrific. Mame, he opts for them, and he was playing pretty well in the tournament, but he seems to be pretty good.
Cool. Well, we're going to take a little break for the Cloud9 roundup right now as we wind up the conversation on that first T1 tournament. We'll be back in just a few minutes, and we'll talk about some scrims probably, who your practice opponents are, and how the general scene in North America is developing for a bit. And then I think we'll take some Q&A from Twitch chat so people can have a chance to ask you guys some questions directly. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. We'll see you guys in a couple.
Howdy there, buckaroos and buckarettes, and welcome to another edition of the Cloud9 Roundup, your source of all Cloud9 news here on the Nines, presented by AT&T. First up, big week for both the League of Legends LCS and Academy rosters. LCS team, well, they go 2-0 once again, beating Team Liquid and Immortals and still flawless on the season. What's more, our boy Blabber, well, he's winning Player of the Week in the LCS. Not only that, you may not know, but our bot lane's been doing particularly well. Vulcan tops the KDA leaderboard across all 12 regions of professional League of Legends with a 46.0 KDA in 4 games. And what's more, Sven, well, now he's number 1 and number 2 on the North American ladder. Moving on to Academy, they're back on track now. 2-0 week for the Academy champions from last split, getting it underway versus Team Liquid Academy and Immortals Academy. Congrats to your first 2-0 week here in the summer. Moving on to some Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Well, the Cloud9 team, they've been competing in CS Summit 6, hosted by Beyond the Summit. They took out their opponents in the CS Summit 6 North American Regional Qualifiers, the New England Whalers and Yag Gaming, 2-0 and 2-0 to make it into the group stage. There, they started strong with another 2-0 win over Gen G before dropping 0-2 to 100 Thieves. This left them on the ropes about to qualify for playoffs. They had to beat Gen G again. This time in a nail-biter of a series, they unfortunately drop out 1-2 and do not qualify for the playoffs. They'll be on the player break coming up soon, so it'll be a while before we hear from CSGO again. In PUBG Mobile, well, Cloud9's team, and the final day of the PUBG Mobile Pro League Spring Split in 4th place, and they qualify for PMWL West. We'll be seeing them again mighty soon. As many of you know, it's time for some more Rainbow Six action as leagues kick off all around the world, and Cloud9, they are competing in the Asia-Pacific region. They're starting strong here in their season with wins over Talon and Q-Confirm Esports. Over on the Valorant side of things, the first North American Ignition Series event was this past weekend, and it was hosted by T1 and Nerd Street Gamers. C9, well, they competed with TenZ and Relyks, the announced players on the roster, as well as Shinobi, Poach, and Mitch, under the name of Cloud9 and Friends. Now, they took a loss to Together We Are Terrific. That's a very naughty acronym team. In the T1 Nerd Street Gamers Valorant Showdown, they also took a loss to Prospects, but they did win against FaZe Clan. However, that wasn't enough to see them through the playoffs, and they end their time in the group stage. But Relics, well, he was announced as the second player joining TenZ here on that official Cloud9 roster as they move towards having a starting 5. To discuss some organizational news from Cloud9 to round out the show, our very own Emma raised $2,000 for Peculiars last Friday, along with some other creators streaming some Call of Duty Warzone. In birthday news, Sweet Black from the Rainbow Six team and Sven from our LCS team both had birthdays, so go ahead and wish them a belated happy one. Finally, if you missed it, Cloud9 held a C9 Fam community night on the Cloud9 Discord this past week. So, if you're not on that Discord, time to mosey on over there and join so you don't miss out on the next community night. Well, that just about does it for this week's Cloud9 Roundup. We'll see you next time.
Hello, we're back with more of the Nines presented by AT&T. And now is your chance. I know I asked for questions, so I'm going to ruin this in the Twitch chat for myself. Now's your chance to win a Puma gift card if you are 18 or older and living in North America. You can put hashtag Puma in the chat, and then you have that chance to win. Otherwise, I will be getting to those questions. Hopefully, you might have to repost them after everybody spams right now so that I can actually see them. But first up, we're going to talk a little bit about your daily routine, because I am curious how you guys are practicing right now, what your coaching and management situation is looking like in a developing esport. So why don't you walk me through an average day of being a Valorant pro right now?
Okay, so
I believe in you, TenZ. You can do it.
wake up in the morning, eat some breakfast. I don't know. Scrims start at around, I'd say, they've been fluctuating recently. What, like
It just kind of depends, like based on the availability of scrims that our manager's able to get. Like sometimes we start at like 12 Pacific, sometimes it's 1, just kind of
Yeah.
depends.
But normally we'd be practicing like we'll do like a block of scrims, so like a BO3 or like 4 maps, 3 maps, and then we take a break and then like 2 more maps or like 3 more maps also.
And then if, I was gonna say like because right now there's no like official, like there's no coach playing with us, so it's just the players. I think that's probably partially because there's not a full solidified roster yet. The coach is
Sure.
probably, you add that after the players. But we do some review in terms of like what did we do wrong, what did we do right, like what should we add, what should we remove. It is a little rough doing a lot of we call it server work when you're not scrimming another team and you're all just in there talking about things. It is hard to do that when you don't have a consistent 5 because you constantly have to re-go over things as you know
Sure.
when you but yeah, so I would say what TenZ says about it. Usually like a block of scrims and then like a break for people to eat and then another block of scrims, and then either before or after we would do some server work or talk about it. Usually after the last set of scrims we'll review and talk about the maps.
Yeah.
One thing that I've noticed in CSGO is that it's very, I would say in esports overall, but even for a tier 1 esport in CSGO, it's very hard to find good coaches in that game, especially if you compare it to other esports of the same level, like League of Legends or Overwatch. I think all have, generally a stronger pool of coaches that are available to them. Is that a concern for you guys as you look ahead into this game as to who could possibly be your coach, considering that I feel like there's so few good ones in CSGO already, and then they would have to move over potentially to Valorant? Or would you be open to coaches from other games that are not tactical shooters? What are you guys thinking?
I've actually seen a pretty big transition of the same way that a lot of players are coming to Valorant from other games. I've seen a bunch of coaches from whatever game they might be coming from looking for work in Valorant. I wouldn't say concerned. I think it's a big opportunity for a lot of people,
Sure.
the same way it is for players. If they can, if they can study up and prove their worth to an org, that they're able to coach Valorant, even if they're from a non-5v5 shooter. But what you're saying is true, though. There is a lack of high-level coaches in CS. A lot of high-level coaches in CS tend to be former players or IGLs who have since retired and moved into the coaching role. I do think the difference between other games and games like CS and Valorant is that the prep work you have to do as a coach is, I can't say more because I don't really know what entails, like what goes into LCS coaching or like other top esports. But in games like CS, like you have to do prep for your match versus that other team on all the maps. So you have to do work. You have to know their comp on each map. You have to know all this other stuff. So there's a lot. I'll tell you some of the Google Docs that I've seen coaches write up on prep work. It's like a college dissertation, the amount of information that they're like
Sure.
compiling there. But I guess we'll just have to see. As a lot of the current teams with coaches, they're coaches from CS. Like TSM's coach is the former Envy CS:GO coach. I think time will tell if there's going to be a lot of new blood coming into the coaching scene from other games and they prove their worth here, or if it's just going to be CS coaches transitioning over.
I think an interesting thing to think about, because this is always a relevant topic in any new esport, is how do you guys want this scene to develop? Because you guys are coming from a CS background where it's all of these independent tournaments, and that travel schedule and lifestyle can get very exhausting, moving around the world constantly, going from one-off event to one-off event. And this is in contrast to what Riot, the company that makes Valorant, has done with their own League of Legends system, which is to localize it, to regionalize it, and have all the players playing, I would say, a less exciting but more stable for their lifestyle regular season in one location, occasionally punctuated by major events. In your perfect world, if you could design how Valorant is going to play out as an esport in the long term, what kind of system would you like to participate in?
I personally say I'd like to participate in like the league type system, just because it is really exhausting when you're traveling 24/7 and you're not really at home ever, or like just like playing constantly, traveling constantly, and like because you're gonna be going to so many tournaments, you're gonna have to be practicing like just as much to play in the tournaments. So it's a little bit rough.
Yeah, I mean, coming from CS, before not too long ago, CS was there's almost no break for players until
Yes.
the Players Association came forward and said we need to have like a designated month break. You were just a CS pro year round. I think there's like pros and cons to both. I guess types of scenes. I think I would prefer, just as Tyson said, the whole LCS type scene. I think it's for long term, it's healthier for players, and you're more like you're a lot less likely to have player burnout and like people that just don't want to play the game anymore because they've just played it for a year straight. Like I heard some crazy stuff from some pros where they said in the last 3 months they've been home 6 days or something.
Yep.
And those nonstop traveling schedules that gets. I mean, it's very exciting, and like I think traveling is one of the greatest things about being an esport pro.
Sure.
But on the other hand, it does get pretty taxing quick.
Yeah, and I think the other advantage, though, to the CS system is that you have the constant international competition, which is not always possible within the League of Legends scene because almost all of the games that you ever play are just within your region, and you have to be one of the top teams to really ever even get a chance to compete at international level.
I think maybe having a mix would be good. I think Riot's, I think they've stated that their potential end goal for Valorant is they're letting the competitive scene develop organically with these different third-party tournament, organizers. And eventually, like, they plan to bring it in-house, which is just what they did with the LCS. I think maybe having the LCS type of format, and maybe if Riot was willing to, I guess, give the license to like third-party organizers to host events where they can give invites to teams, we might see more international tournaments and stuff. I remember in League they used to do like there was like IEM, like Intel Extreme Master tournaments, and
Yes.
I don't know how that worked though. I don't know if Riot just said, okay, Intel, like you can host the tournament, or if that was just Riot's tournament sponsored by Intel.
I can tell you because I worked those events. So basically what happened was during certain breaks within the season, they would create a break and allow the teams to fly to like Katowice from Korea, other parts of Europe, North America, and they would all compete there. But it didn't have any effect on the season. It was just an international tournament for prestige and money.
So stuff like that would be cool in Valorant, and it would allow for more international tournament competition compared to, I guess, just like a Worlds event or something would be like the one-off.
Speaking of international competition, there's a good question here from Yes Waystation, which is, what are your thoughts on the European teams that are emerging? So most notably, the big team that was winning a lot of the beta tournaments was Fish123, which is coached by Sliggy, who's a former observer and notable CSGO person. And then you also have G2 now, who's picked up Mixwell, who is a former also Cloud9 player, and Scream, who is a CSGO legend, and they've been performing very well also. How do you think the European scene compares to NA right now?
I haven't been paying attention too much to the European scene at the moment, so I can't really state my opinion just from my lack of information.
G2 did just run their own Ignition series like T1 did before the week before this past tournament.
Yeah, sorry. What I was going to say was that I'm kind of the same as TenZ, where I've not paid a lot of attention to the EU scene. But as far as I'm aware, compared to the NA scene, there's not as many like fully established rosters with orgs. Like you're talking about G2 being like probably the biggest, and like I think, but compared to NA, where we're seeing Immortals, Gen.G, TSM, Cloud9, you're seeing a lot of pretty well-known orgs entering the space. EU is a little slower, I think, right now. But I think similar to like CS, where EU has always been a powerhouse region, it'll probably be the same eventually. Like they'll get there. There's clearly talented players and people with like good FPS background that are playing. So
yeah.
From Secret Asian Man 93. So, question for you guys: when you fill out the roster, do you put more importance on really good players or players that complement your play style? And since it's only you two so far, do you feel like you have an identity that you're looking to establish, or are you trying to feel it out as you try out players?
I'd say it's probably just mostly a feeling-based thing, and we just want to make sure the environment isn't like toxic or anything. Like, we do want good players. We do want players like good attitudes and stuff like that. So, we're just feeling out the roster. That's it.
Yeah, if I had something to add, I mean, having people that are skilled is important, but we're looking for people that, like I said before, share the same mindset, the same goals, and they understand what's expected of them. And most importantly, people that will be good teammates. Because, you can find players that are individually exceptional, but if they're not communicative, if they don't understand the aspects of team play and like what you need to do to be successful as a team, like those are the type of people that get into the mindset of it's me, I'm the star. All that matters is like I'm performing, but it's a big picture type of thing.
To those of you asking about whether there will be LAN events, the answer is no, not as long as this global pandemic is continuing. I think many people would love to run some Valorant LAN events if that was possible right now, but that's definitely not going to happen within the next few months unless somebody comes up with some pretty creative solutions to how that could occur. Maybe somebody's going to create the equivalent of the NBA like quarantine bubble and be able to pull that off, but I think that's a pretty big feat for the time being. Question, for me. Do you expect the Korean teams in Valorant to be as dominant as they were in League, or will it be more like CSGO where the Asian teams are generally weaker than their Western counterparts? Okay, so you have to unpack that one and ask why the CSGO teams in Asia were weaker, and the answer is that, at least in Korea, what ended up happening was that the Steam is not installed in the PC bongs, so if you go into an internet cafe in Korea where most people play these games, you would have to install Steam yourself in order to play CSGO. So it's kind of a pain in the ass. It was never really the big tactical shooter there. The big tactical shooter in Korea is a game called Sudden Attack, which is a terrible game, but there are still major tournaments for it. And then in the rest of Asia as well, I think the CS Online was kind of pushed by Valve, and they never really, I think, pushed CSGO in the same way. Personally, I'm hoping they do that if they ever update it with the Source 2 engine. Now, the difference with Valorant is that obviously right now, the last time I looked, League of Legends had just under, I think it had 48% of the total playtime in PC bongs, which is obviously huge, #1 game in Korea. So people are used to logging in via the Riot client. Now, the issue that many PC bongs have had, and why Valorant's playtime, I think, is at about 1% in Korea right now, is because of Vanguard. Yes, because the Vanguard system is actually preventing the computers at the PC bongs from working properly. And what ends up happening is because there are security systems on the computers and having multiple users is being prevented by having Vanguard on the PCs. So as I understand it from talking to people recently in Korea, that they have been designating certain PCs as Valorant only so people can play, but it has been difficult to get things started with the anti-cheat system so far. I imagine Riot will solve that problem, but we're not really going to have a good idea of how big this game can be in Korea until that issue is fixed. We also don't know publicly, Riot knows obviously, we don't know publicly how many people are playing Valorant at home. So we only have the PC bong numbers. There could be a lot of people playing at home for all I know. But yes, I think Korea's development will really depend on them solving the Vanguard issues. And I hope they do, because one of the exciting things I think about Valorant as a title is the chance to have a truly global tactical FPS where we can see quality competition and we can see elite teams from both the West and from Asia like we do in League of Legends. So that'd be my answer. Are you guys excited about that possibility coming from a game where you weren't able to play a lot of Asian rosters?
Yeah, I think it's pretty exciting. Obviously, the Asian scenes in general in CS are not very strong. And I think in general, Asia, in terms of like if you're just looking at the entire region, Japan, Korea, China, in terms of FPS, like you were talking about, they've not really ever, like they're really big into RTS, like StarCraft and League and MOBAs. I know like Crossfire is still huge, I think, in China.
Yeah, it's huge. And Southeast Asia as well.
Yeah, and like sudden attack in Korea, like you're talking about. And then just recently, where CS:GO or like Valve partnered with Perfect World to have their Chinese client of CS:GO.
Yes.
That was huge for CS because
Yes.
obviously China's a huge market.
And the CS player base in China, since they did that and they made the game free to play, has gone up dramatically in China. So
Yeah, I think like what you said with Riot, I'm sure that China, Japan, Korea will definitely have more of a player base in Valorant than they do in previous FPS titles. And like you said, there will actually be a chance for an international scene if some orgs get involved and some teams, they start playing like high level competition.
Yeah, I'm gonna say from like a Spectre standpoint, when like the East gets more involved and stuff, like when I watched the CS:GO majors and there was like Ty Lue in the tournaments, they're just a really fun team to watch just
Yeah, they
because of
were
how
fun.
like just because how risky they played, or like I don't know, I'll just see one dude like run out with an op and try to like no scope 4 people and it'll work and it'll be like, wow, like nobody does that.
yeah, their playstyle was certainly interesting. Here's a question. What sort of agent would you like to see added onto the current pool in terms of utility? What do you think are the holes right now when it comes to agent performance? You alluded earlier in this show to the fact that there's kind of a limited number of smokes and flashes you can have on a lineup because of the fact that you're kind of stuck to specific agents. What do you think would be effective in terms of adding to the game?
This is a weird I'm only bringing this up. Will, a manager at C9, said this would be an interesting discussion point if there was an option for it. He said his crusade for a character ability is for a new character with a blast shield that can protect them from a single op shot so they can enter into a site more easily. Essentially a second entry fragger.
That sounds really broken.
I don't know about that.
Look, all I'm going to say, Will, is that I worked in Overwatch, and the shield creep was super unfortunate in that game. So maybe I'm biased from what happened to Overwatch, but that would be a bold move. I think it might be interesting. But what do you guys think in terms of abilities?
People have been discussing, I think, an agent with an ability to somehow extinguish mollies or something like that would be interesting. You see a lot of teams just play post plant where they'll use Brimstone's molly or his ult or Sova's shock darts and things like that to prevent the spike diffuse. So much so that sometimes it's impossible to win a round simply because of they have two abilities saved. And they can be nowhere near the bomb or the spike, I should say, and they can still prevent you from diffusing it. So I think maybe an agent that could put out a Brimstone molly on the bomb, some type of put out a Phoenix molly too. I don't know.
I'm thinking right now it'd be cool if there's just like an agent that put down an ability that just ignored all abilities in like a ring or something like that. That'd be kind of cool. Or like a Brimstone ulti or the Brimstone molly, like you said, but it's like a small little ring.
You know, TenZ, you can just go back to Counter-Strike if you want that. I'm just saying. No, I agree. I think that would be interesting to have like a nullification field. So this guy's very insistent. He wants to know, Tyson, if you have any opping tips, because he needs opping tips. I would say just get better mechanics, but do you have anything specifically that you think has helped you out in playing Valorant?
I've been mainly focusing on my movement when I'm opping, so you just want to make sure that you're always standing still when you're taking shots. That was probably my biggest thing that I had to work on.
What are your thoughts on some of the CS players that are moving over who were banned for cheating or match fixing? Obviously, Brax is probably like the biggest one right now because he's on T1. We might see other players in the future, potentially Steel move over, but how are you guys feeling about them in Valorant right now?
Yeah, so I mean, on T1 you have Brax and AZK, who are obviously two of the iBuyPower players that were banned. Recently, Dazed announced that he was trying to make a team in Valorant and wanted to start scrimming. Steel is still playing with Chaos and CS, and then yeah, I mean, how do I feel about them? I honestly, I'm happy for them. I think regardless of the stupid mistake they made in the past, my opinion at least is that they served plenty of time for it. And then at least with people like Brax and Steel, like they continued playing CS for years with their indefinite ban, never sure if they would eventually be unbanned. AZK went to Overwatch for a bit, I think, and then he was also playing Reflex. He was like trying other games out, but I think them having a game similar to CS mechanically, and having another chance to make a name for themselves in a new game and in a new esport is pretty cool for them. I'm excited to see what they do.
I still think it's lame that they were banned indefinitely, personally. So, but yeah, I agree that it's really nice that they have a chance to show off right now because they are extremely skilled players. Let's ask one final question, which I think is a really interesting discussion considering the recent announcement of them releasing 6 agents per year. How many maps and agents are too many in a tactical shooter? Because coming from League of Legends, they have over 150 different champions right now, but they only have one map, so it does balance out a little bit. But given that Riot's business model has always revolved around them releasing these new characters in League of Legends, is there a point where you think this just gets absolutely crazy? Because I guess my concern is, at a certain point, you run out of ways to do utility in a tactical shooter, and then you have to start adding really weird abilities to these agents.
I'd say like probably the number of operators that are like in Rainbow Six. Like I'm not too sure, but I feel like that's probably a good like mix. Like you don't want to get into the hundreds, I'd say, with a tac shooter, just because there's so much like information that you retain about every single character and like certain ways you have to play against each character.
That doesn't
Like,
stop them
different
in
comps.
League.
Yeah,
Anyway, continue.
56, by the way. I just looked it up.
56. Yeah, I'd say like that's probably a good amount. If anything, like maybe it might be too much. I'm not too sure. I really have to just see.
Yeah, I would say in terms of maps, as long as they do, like, CS has a rotating competitive map pool where there's 7 maps at any given time for play. I think it's fine in Valorant if they were to continue making more maps, as long as they had a clear set of maps that would be used in competitive play. And then when you wanted to make it fresh, you can cycle one in and out. As far as agents go, I'm trying to think of what number is good for having because I think having a pick ban phase where you can veto agents would be really cool in Valorant, because at the moment, I'm not calling people out, there are some teams who very obviously rely on one agent, let's say, for a majority of all of their stuff. So they run Sova, and almost all of their strats revolve around following the drone into a site or waiting for the sensor dart. And it's like, if you were to ban that agent, I'm interested to see, let's say they couldn't pick that, what would their comp be? How would they play?
Sure, yeah.
Maybe something like, if there's 5 agents a team, I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to 30. Like, it would be nice to have a lot of variety and a lot of options, but I do agree that compared to a MOBA, they will reach a point where it's like, what do we do to innovate? Like, what,
I think in this case, too, you have to have probably at least 30 or 35 to even remotely have a chance to have a draft, because the situation I think you'll run into is if you have fewer than that, then you can ban out like all the agents with smokes or something like that, and the game can get super weird as a result of that. So I think you have to have enough kind of utility across a wide variety of agents to make that make sense, and that's probably at least 35, I would say, if you were to have that system. And for what it's worth, Volcano has said that his intention is to create a static map pool that you're playing the same maps over and over and over time. And I think that what they want to do is provide the variety through agents. So I don't know what the map veto process is going to look like, but it would be interesting to have both a map veto. It might take a while on broadcast to have a map veto and an agent veto or an agent pick ban process. Do you guys think that it would be helpful to have each agent only be able to be picked by one team? Is that something you could see happening in the future as well? Like only one team can pick Sova?
Yeah, I was having a discussion about that. Obviously, you need enough agents in the pool for that to be possible. I mean, it would definitely be interesting. If you look at League, there's no mirror matches. Like that's right. That's how it works. So
yes, Well,
I would
there were at
definitely-
one time, but yes, sure.
Well, yeah, but so with a pick ban draft phase and then not having mirror matches, it would be pretty cool. Because at the moment you see, typically it's like at least 3 agents probably the same on each team: Cypher, Sage, Brimstone. The big ones. I think not having mirror matches would be cool. It would definitely bring a more dynamic style of play because both teams have 5 completely different agents, so they're going to have different ways of defending the sites and different ways of attacking. Whereas right now, if you have a Cypher defending B and they have a Cypher defending B, it's kind of like the same thing, on both sides.
How about you, TenZ? Do you have any thoughts on agent pick bans or where all of this is going in terms of number of maps or number of agents?
Yeah, well, I'd say you would want a good amount of agents where when agents are banned out, you're not forced onto like a lesser agent. There's always gonna be an agent that's probably gonna be weaker than the rest or something like that in the meta. But yeah, I would probably 30, 35 sounds good to me.
All right. Well, we'll leave you guys with that. I know you guys will have some practice later today. Plenty of events coming up in the next month for you guys to compete in while you continue to try out your teammates. That'll do it for this episode of the Nines presented by AT&T. If you missed part of it, the VOD will be here on the Cloud9 Twitch channel, and you can catch it on the YouTube channel as well in about a day. So thank you very much for joining us. We'll be doing a pre-recorded episode next week with some of the Cloud9 Counter-Strike Global Offensive players. Should have Floppy and their assistant coach Mix on that show to talk about their 2020 so far and their uptick in performances. So we'll see you then.